Hi, this is Philosophy71, and today we're going to talk about third and fourth wave feminism. So, after second wave feminism, there was a lot of backlash. I mean, obviously, the oppressors wanted to continue being the dominant group, and so they were trying to fight feminism. They were trying to, at the very least, slow it down, but they were trying to discredit what had been said in feminism. They were saying, "Oh no, women, women are fine," and of course that was not true. We have people like Rush Limbaugh who said, in reaction to the term male chauvinist pig that some people were applying to the oppressors, Rush Limbaugh said, well, those feminazis, and so that was a term that he used for feminists, and it actually became popular, and a lot of people were saying, oh, feminazis this and feminazis that, and the women were saying, look, we just want equal rights. We're not trying to displace you, we're trying to be equal with you. But like I said, a lot of oppression. I think one of the most insidious, that it's almost laughable. I want to read you a quote. So this quote comes from Pat Robertson, who was a um, very conservative Republican evangelical leader, and he had a TV following for his ministry and so forth. So at one of the GOP conventions, Robertson said, "Feminism encourages women to leave their husbands, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians." I mean, that is a direct quote, and I'm just going to read it again because I think it's very impactful. Feminism encourages women to leave their husbands, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians. Like I said, it's so idiotic, it's almost laughable, but it's not laughable because so many people took this to heart. So many people were actually supporting his view that feminism was going to create monsters, that feminism was an ideology that would turn women into, well, what does he say? Witches and anti-capitalists and lesbians, and of course nobody wants that, right? So um, um, I mean, it came to a point where people during what we were identifying as the third wave, so the mid 1990s, um, people didn't want to identify as feminist. They didn't want to use the word, and it was kind of confusing because people would say things like, "Oh, I think women should have equal opportunity, and I think women should have, equal rights and everything." But oh, I'm not a feminist. And it's like, well, then what are you, right? But they didn't want to use the word. We also had two new developments during this time. One was the idea that if we want to fight oppression, we need to become oppressors, basically. A lot of the most popular effort was this book called Fire with Fire by Naomi Wolf. And she says, look, basically, if we want to overcome sexism, we need to, women and feminists need to have positions of power so that we can change the institution. Maybe not a bad idea, but at the same time, she's advocating things like we become oppressors in order to end the oppression of women. And so I don't particularly agree with that. I don't think a lot of feminists do. I mean, the idea here is to end oppression. The other thing that happened is that because some strides had been made in feminism and women were in a slightly better place, okay, that some of the newer generation that came to adulthood in the 90s started saying, well, we don't need feminism anymore. There are things that I need to maybe deal with that have to do with me personally, but I don't need all of this feminist male bashing, stuff. And in fact, some of them began saying, I'm going to show that I am free. I'm going to show that I have achieved liberation by dressing how I want, flaunting my sexuality, because I can do that now. And so they began, women began dressing in high heels, stilettos, um, push-up bras that would, lift their boobs up to here, and expose their cleavage, and tight skirts that showed their butts, and all of this stuff that enhanced or put focus on their sexuality. And they were like, see, this is me as a feminist. I'm free to do this, and I am free to express my sexuality. What they failed to realize, and many of them still fail to realize, is that that expression of their sexuality was created by men. In other words, pushing your boobs up and stiletto heels are things that men like to see. They think that it makes a woman look attractive. It's called, the male gaze, right? The male gaze is on the woman, and when the woman dresses or acts in a way that she is trying to please him and satisfy the male gaze, that is not feminist. That is playing into the oppression. And when you talk to some of the women who still, make sure that their makeup is perfect and their the way they dress and so forth is very sensual or sexy, and you ask them, are you doing that to please men? And they'll say, no, I'm doing it because it makes me happy. Or they say, I'm doing it because I'm competing with other women, and I want to show myself off to other women. And both of those answers are still buying into sexism, because if you dress that way because it makes you feel good, it makes you feel good because you have internalized that male gaze and said, I look good, I feel good, right? Because I'm fitting this male gaze. And when you are dressing that way or acting a particular way in order to, impress other women or compete with other women, again, it's in the terms of the male gaze. You are trying to impress other women because you're like, I am this much more attractive than you. I have a better chance of attracting a male, and so forth. So those claims that I can wear makeup and stiletto heels and still be a feminist, I think are bullshit. Maybe you think you're a feminist and you're trying to be a feminist, but you are missing things at a fundamental value. So we've got feminism that is saying, let's fight men with their own weapons. We've got feminism that is trying to say, look, I'm embracing my sexuality and my sexiness. We've got feminism that is still all of the different types of feminism that we had from second wave going on. And then we've got a whole lot of people who just say feminism is over, we don't need it, and it does horrible things and makes women into baby killers. So third wave was just a hot mess. I mean, there's no other way to describe it, or there are ways to describe it that I probably can't use in this video. But it was a hot mess. I mean, nobody knew what was going on. They were, influenced by a very conservative media and press that was presenting the male bashing and ideas in feminism, and it took root, and so that was a problem. Third wave feminism ran until about the early 2000s. There are still, of course, people who will say, look, I believe in equal rights, but I don't support feminism, or I'm not a feminist. There are people who will say, I'm dressing, because it makes me happy, and don't understand that the happiness comes from they're playing their role in the oppression. But in fourth wave feminism, I'm hesitant to even call it feminism, because the focus moves away from women and the needs of women and the equality of women, and becomes a focus that is on um, equality for everyone. Not a bad thing, right? I mean, I think it would be great if we ended oppression for everyone, regardless of gender or sex or, skin color or class or religion or, anything. I think it would be great if we could end that oppression. But that's not feminism. That's what we're calling intersectionality. It's the intersection of all these different um, fights to make life better for everyone, besides the oppressors, and to end the oppression. And maybe it needs a different name. Perhaps we could call it humanism, but the problem with that is a term that was adopted by black feminists in the 80s, and they were saying, look, let's our brand of feminism is humanism. We're addressing our race and our feminist issues at the same time. Maybe what we call fourth wave feminism should just be called intersectionality. I mean, I don't really know or have a name for it, but I don't think it is feminism in a sense. Yes, it's interested in women and women's oppression, but it's also, again, just part of the whole pot of things that we're dealing with. So why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem, I think, and Steinem and Bell Hooks would agree with this. It's a problem because if we look at the oppression of people, regardless of whom they are, it begins with the oppression of women. And sometimes that is really hard for people to get a grip on. Sometimes people don't understand that. Dominance and oppression began in the home. Even before there were homes, when there were just, people living, fairly much in the wild, right? I mean, it was their home. But from the beginning of the male-female relationship, we had a dominant member because he was larger and stronger, and, pardon me, a subordinate member of the household because she wasn't as strong or as large as he was. Pardon me. Sorry about that. So hopefully I won't keep coughing. Anyway, the intersectionality has great goals. I mean, who wouldn't want to end the oppression of all people? But again, it starts in the home with the oppression of women. And in the video from last week from Steinem and Hooks, they talk about this a little bit. They talk about how that the original violence that started in the home with not just the oppression or domination of male over female, but frequently violence of male over female, that normalized violence, and it normalized oppression of everyone. I mean, the thing is, if the situation in the home says, look, there's a hierarchy. There's the male, and then there's everybody else, right? And there's the female, and then below them are the children, until the son gets to a certain age, and then he takes precedent over his mother, and we've got a whole hierarchy that is running continually. That is one of dominance and oppression. Who's in charge? And then when we started to bring in ideas of private property, that increased that, because it was like, well, this is mine. I will dominate you. In other words, exploit you or harm you to take things that I want. This is mine, including these people are mine. This woman is owned by me. These other people, these slaves, are owned by me. And that ideology of ownership of other people, and even to a certain extent the ownership of private property, comes from this idea of dominance that gets started in the home. So it's hard to see sometimes until somebody explains it, like I'm about to. But if you want to end racism, if you want to end, Zionism and wars and injustices that are done to people of various groups that aren't the dominant group, and harm done to women, the first thing that you need to do is end the oppression of women. So feminism's goal should be ending the oppression of women. Again, it's not bad to end the oppression of everyone. But to get there, we've got to start with and complete the ending of the oppression of women. Once we take that idea of dominance and the hierarchy out of our collective thinking, and people become raised in the idea that we are equal, we will stop all of these other types of oppression. We will stop oppressing people or discriminate against people because they are not in the same class or because they're not from the same background, those kind of things. Yes, it all works together, but it begins with the oppression of women. And so a proper fourth wave feminism would focus on ending oppression of women, which leads ultimately to ending the oppression of all people, and could go so far as to ending wars. I mean, if we had the entire world on board with this. But currently what we're calling fourth wave feminism, as I've said, I don't like calling it that, because it's not. It is a good movement, but it's not necessarily feminist. And in the paper I gave you to read for this week about fourth wave feminism, one of the things that one of the bits in there that I like is near the end, and she says something like, feminism should not be comfortable, and it most certainly shouldn't be pretty. In other words, women should not be fighting fire with, with that kind of their sexual power. They should not be comfortable and say, well, we'll be complacent and let's go out and march and fight for all of these other things that are going on. But I go home, and this is just the most ironic thing. But some of these women who are out protesting for the rights of all people, go home and are abused by their male partners, right? And they can stand up for others, but not for themselves. And I think that Sinem and Hooks are right when we say we've got to stop that that original violence. And yeah, it's not going to be pretty and it's not going to be comfortable. But I think we need something that is, whether we want to call it fifth wave uh, feminism or just return to an actual feminism where the focus is on ending sexism, ending oppression for women, um, ending the discrimination, ending the invisible biases against women, ending the manipulation of women as, political tools, just allowing the equality that we've been talking about all semester, that is a social, economic, and political equality. We still don't have equal pay for equal work, and 40 years of trying to get that has not brought it about. We also haven't had a passage in this country of the Equal Rights Amendment that guarantees women equality of pay and equality of opportunity. And we definitely need to make it, even though it's going to be uncomfortable and not pretty, but we need to make it happen. So I know I'm a little preachy, but I'm passionate about this, that if we want to make the world a better place, we need to start with making the world of women a better place. So that's, I guess, what I have to say on third and fourth wave third and fourth wave feminism. Um, Make sure you get that reading done on fourth wave feminism. If you're forgetting or wanting more information on third wave, remember early in the semester, I think first week, I gave you a reading that covered the 4 different waves, and it's got a section on third wave. So there's some material for you. This is essentially the last lecture having to do with course material. So there will be another video coming up for the final. But otherwise, fight on, sister. That's all I have to say.